Welcome back. So the next thing that we will be looking at is how to extend your scene in Unity. So the last video dealt with launching a VR application using Unity in your Oculus Quest 2 headset. And this video will look at how we can extend the scene and start to add some details. For example, bringing in your own assets or creating some terrain. So the first thing we will do is start with the terrain generator. So right-click in your hierarchy, go to Create 3D Object, and then select Terrain. Once you do that, you'll see this big form, or this plane that gets created. So if you try to rotate it, you cannot really. It just kind of changes the position. If you try to scale it, again, it doesn't really do anything. It just changes the position. Same thing. But the one thing you can do is move it. So right now, I want to center this where my VR toolkit is. So I'm going to go X minus 500. And then that brings us to the center of the form. And then Z minus 506. So I'll just make this 500. And here we go. So let's zoom in. Let's zoom into one of our objects. Zoom into the ladder. So you double click on what you want to zoom into in the hierarchy and it'll take you there. You can also select something and then press F for focus, and it'll take you there as well. So let's see how the hierarchy works. So I'm going to select or let's see how the terrain works. So I'm going to select the terrain, and then in the inspector window you can see a few buttons. So if you select create neighbor terrains, it gives you an option to create terrains alongside. So you just click on which cell or grid you want to fill. So we're not going to do this right now, but this is how you add more to your terrain. Next thing you're going to look at is paint terrain. So this is where we'll do most of our work. And then if you look at these brushes, there's different types of brushes that you can use to paint your terrain. You can increase your brush size, the opacity of the brush. So if I start creating some terrain, so here instead of paint texture, you want to go into raise or lower terrain. And then here you can start to see it starts to create something. And you can play around with this. And then if you press Shift and go back to where you created your terrain, it'll reduce the height of that terrain. You can also flatten your terrain, so you can go into set height and then height 0, and then you can just say flatten tile or flatten all if you have multiple terrains. So let's undo that because we want to keep our terrain for now. And then let's go into we will go into smooth height, so you can also smoothen some of these forms that you create. And then let's go back to paint texture. And in paint texture, now you'll see here it shows you an option to edit terrain layers. So you can create layer, and then you can select a form. So for example, you can select, or you can select a material. So for example, I'll just go select this plywood albedo. You can see it adds it to everything. So the first one is going to add to everything, and then the next one, I'm going to go add layer, or actually let's go create layer, and we will select, let's select the construction light albedo, and then you select that, and you can come down, and again you can select the type of brush size, opacity, and then you can paint this color. So you could actually create a pathway, for example, using this. So we'll just create a pathway, come back here, and then you can see how it shows up here. So this is something you just have to kind of play with. You can also paint trees, paint details, change your terrain settings. So have a look at how you would play around with this. The next thing we're going to look at is ProBuilder. So ProBuilder helps you quickly iterate forms, and you can even create forms if you want. So we'll go into Window. We'll go into Package Manager, and we will search for ProBuilder. Here it is. Let's go ahead and install it. So once it's installed, we'll go back to Tools, ProBuilder, and you'll see here ProBuilder window. So we're just going to go ahead and select this, and it'll bring up this little menu. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go place it next to my inspector. So once you're in here, you can go ahead and select, for example, new shape. There's a whole bunch of shapes in here you can play with. So for example, if I just want to build a cube, I can select it like this. I can build this. Once I'm done with this, then you'll see up here you have some menu items. And you can select vertex selection. So for example, if I select this vertex, I can change its position. I can change the form of my cube. I can also go into edge mode. So this is edge selection. So you can select edges and move those around. You can also rotate your edge. You can also scale it. So there's really a lot of capabilities you can have in here. And if you go into face mode, you can select the face. You can scale your face, or you can move your face. And then the other thing to note here is now if I want to move this face, but I actually want to extrude it. I don't want to just move the face. So I can hold down the Shift key. So hold down the Shift key, and then when you move this, you'll see how it starts to create an extrusion of that face. So I can go ahead and, for example, I can rotate this, and then I can press Shift again, and I can extrude this in different locations. Then I can go ahead and rotate this again if I want to. I could scale it, and then I could press Shift again, and then move this, and then extrude it again. So there's really a lot you can do in terms of the shape. So if I go to object mode, I select this. You can move your entire object around. And then let's go ahead and maybe make another shape. We'll make, let's make a prism. So here you can see your prism has been created. So once I'm in the prism mode, I'm going to go edge. I can select an edge, for example. And I can now move this around. I can play with that. I can select face. I can move this. And you can even go ahead and start to smooth objects. So let's say I created this object here. I can select it, go into object mode, select it, and then in the smoothing, I'm going to go level 23. And then you can start to see in the actual space, it starts to smoothen your object. And you could even do it to separate faces. The other thing we can do is we can actually change the material even by face. So on this cube, for example, if I go face selection and I just select the one face, I can drop a material on it and it'll apply it to just that object or just that face. I can also select my prism here, for example, and I can drop a material on there and it'll color the entire prism. Let's drop another material on there. There we go. So you could do it by face, or you could do it by the entire object itself. The other thing we can make here is we can actually make stairs. So for example, I could go like this, and I could create stairs. I could change the orientation of how this thing sits, because I actually want to be able to climb up this thing. Oops. Yeah. And then if I move this out and I select faces, I can start to manipulate this object as well. So same rules apply. You can select a face, for example, and I can go ahead and if I want to add more levels, I could simply extrude this, extrude it in a different direction if I want, and then extrude it again, and then keep going. And then go back to object mode, move the whole thing, and then here you have some extra steps. Let's also try making another cube. I'm just going to try something here. And let's say if I want to take this cube and I want to place it on top of one of these other objects, I'm going to select Shift and Control, or actually Shift and Control, and you see how it allows me to move it. I can actually place it on top of objects if I want. So I'll just go place it over here for now. So Shift and Control is the button for that. The other thing you could do is press V. So while you have this selected, press V and see how it allows you to snap to vertex. I'm just moving my mouse and it's allowing me to snap to vertex. I can do that, and I can actually snap it to something else's vertex while holding down the V key. There you go. Just going to make it finely balanced here. So the other thing that we can do now to start building our scene here is to start looking at the sky. So why don't we go into Unity Store. So let's go into Unity Asset Store. So you need to be signed into the Unity Asset Store with the same ID that you sign in into Unity itself. Let's look at maybe Skybox Extended Shader. Let's add it to Assets. And then it'll ask you to open it in Unity. So when you see it here, it opens up in your package manager. You just go import. It'll import everything. You'll see something like this. So I'm just going to select everything and go import. And once it's in there, you'll see it show up in your assets. So I'm just going to go into Voxophobic, which is the company that makes it. Skybox Extended. I'm going to go into Demo, and I will go into Materials. And then here you're going to see Skybox Cube Map Extended. And then you can see actually a preview of this. Daytime, nighttime, and then there's a blended mode as well. So why don't we go ahead and take the blended mode, but I'm gonna rotate my screen so I can see the sky, and I'm gonna take this and drop it onto the sky. So here now you can see you have a little bit of scene going on. So why don't we go ahead and test the scene now that we've built in some other things and extended the scene. But the first thing I'm going to do before that is remember the tunneling vision that we were seeing. So I'll go into XR origin, camera offset, main camera, and then you see this tunneling vignette. It's actually a prefab that's added to the camera, so you see it. So I want to disable it. I want to delete it. I want to disable it. So I'm going to go ahead in Inspector window and just unselect right here. So it disables it from coming into my scene. So let's go ahead, put on the Oculus headset. So let's go into our Quest link. And the thing you need to do is on your computer, you need to be running your Oculus app. And then make sure that your device is connected. Go and select Enable Quest link. And it'll take you into the Oculus Rift window, or Rift mode. So just raise your headset slightly and go back into Unity and press play in your scene. And here we go. You're in the scene. You can see the objects that we created. We created this low poly sphinx, I guess. It's interesting. You can work around, you can take the pathway that you created. You can try going up these stairs, but I think I doubled up one of the steps, so I'm not going to get very far. And it seems a bit steep. Oh, still working. Not up this step, though. Here's a little sculpture that we created. Then you can come back to your scene. You can also see the sky moving around you. So there we have it. And if you want to build and run, I showed how to do that in the last video. So go ahead and give that a try if you like to launch this as an application in Unity. If you want to continue extending this scene, okay, before we continue, let's press play here again so we get out of game mode. If you want to continue extending this scene, you can come here and you can search for sample scene. And if you go here, if you just want something for free, you can also look at, environment packs, what else there might be, low poly scene. I think you can also find a few things like vegetation, mountains, buildings. There's a lot of things here that you can play with and bring into your forms. The other thing you can also do is you can import your own assets. So for example, if you have an FBX file or if you have an OBJ file, you can simply drag and drop it into your scene here. And it'll import into Unity. There's many ways of importing with texture as well. So for example, if you have something in Blender with texture, you can bring it in here and start to build your scene. The other thing to understand is how to work with prefabs. So for example, if I have this cube and I have this prism and I want to make them part of the same family, I can just drag and drop my cube into the prism. And then when I move the prism around, it moves everything around. So the next video will deal with how to, we'll go a little bit more in depth with prefabs. But the basic gist of it is, let's say if I'm in assets, and if I simply want to create a repeatable version of this prism and cube, I can take my prism and I can drag and drop it in my inspector or my assets, and you'll see how it creates this this prefab looking thing here. So if I take this and now drag it and drop it back in my hierarchy, it'll give me another assembly or prefab. And then within here, I could select my cube, for example, and I could make changes to it separately.